That's lovely. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this evening for this webinar on an update from Lundy. It's lovely to see so many of you online. We've actually broken the landmark record for the number of people who've signed up for a webinar. So very well done, Derek and Joe. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alison Parkin, and I am one of the development managers here at Landmark Trust. This evening, we're very lucky to have with us Derek Green, who is the Managing Director of the Lundy Company, and Joe Parker, who's the Island Warden. And Joe's going to speak to us about the wildlife on Lundy and give us an update about all the amazing engagement programs that have taken place this year. And then Derek is going to share some very exciting news about progress with renewable energy on Lundy and tell us a little bit more about that. Before we get started, I've just got a couple of housekeeping points. We use auto captioning for these webinars. If you don't like the auto captions, you can very simply turn them off. There's a little button right in the center of your screen with a CC that shows show captions. If you click that, it'll turn the captions on and off, and you can make them larger or smaller if you want to do that. Derek and Joe are going to speak for about an hour between them, and then we'll have a short period of questions afterwards. If you'd like to ask a question, you don't need to wait till the end. You can just drop it into the chat box. We'll keep an eye on it, and we'll try and get through as many as we can at the end of the session. I think that's enough from me. We are recording this, so if you do need to go, you can't stay right to the end. Don't worry about it. We'll send the recording to everybody who registered, so you won't miss out on anything. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Joe.
Thank you so much, Alison. With the magic of technology, I'll try and share my screen and pull up my presentation. I am delighted that so many people have signed up for this talk. As Alison said, my name is Joe and I'm the Island Warden. I live and breathe conservation, as you'll probably find out if you've not met me before. Birds in particular really get me going. So I'll try and keep this to my 30-minute allocation and we'll see how I do. So if you've not been to Lundy before, there's a few of us that run the conservation team. And in the last season, there's been a little bit of change. So hopefully you can see my cursor. There's myself extracting a bird out of a mist net. We'll talk a bit about ringing and what that looks like later. To the right there, we've got Tara, who's my wonderful assistant warden. She really focuses on the marine biology and then supports a lot of the engagement we do on the island. Moving right again, we've got Roger, in inverted commas there, because he's actually a Matt, but we've got far too many Matts and Joes and Johns on the island. So we have to get a bit creative. My nickname's Joe Bird, and we had to take Matt's middle name, Roger, to avoid confusion there amongst other staff. And to the right, great time working with Tom, the island farmer. But all of the amazing conservation work I'm going to talk about would not be possible without the lovely volunteers we get through the season. And 2024 was a bumper year. The row below, all the different people that came over and stayed on the island. I'm so proud of the long-term residential placements we offer on the island. We'll talk through some of their work as we go through, but we've got Lucy, who did our seabird recording. Lundy's the 3rd largest cliff nesting seabird island in England. So I can't, unfortunately, count all those birds on my own, and I need the help of Lucy. Thomas and Angus came over to help with the bird obs, along with Brennig and Tom Williams. Luke came back after several years, actually went on to Fair Isle after his time on Lundy. Ewan, assistant ranger, making sure that the island's looking prim and proper. And Ben helped conduct our seal field work later in the season. Touching on all those different faces, also amazing work thanks to the other volunteers we have that live on the mainland. Big shout out to our Lundy ambassadors. I wonder if one or two are on this Zoom actually. Our ambassadors come over on our day trips during the sailing season, which runs from April through to October, typically 3 times a week. And on every sailing, near enough, there'll be a Lundy ambassador who will conduct a guided walk. Last season, we did 66 guided walks, taking out, just shy of 800 people around the island, interpreting the island's wildlife, its history. And we brought over school groups as well. So I head up the engagement there. We have brought over 17 primary schools last year. Well, 14 primary schools, I should say. 17 in total, including a couple of secondary schools and colleges. And you can see my assistant warden here, Tara, by the castle, talking about the history. And in fact, you can see some of the wonderful work our primary schools have been doing. There's an outreach that goes on before their visit. A Lundy ambassador goes into the school, talks about the wildlife, sets these little superhero tasks. They learn lots of different facts about Lundy's wildlife, and they get a bit creative, creating postcards. You can see they've got facts here about the island's feral goats, the ground nesting skylarks that breed here, and of course, who couldn't talk about Lundy without mentioning the puffins? Puffins have started arriving back, actually. First turned up on Tuesday, and they're already being seen on the land. So if you're hoping to see a Lundy puffin visiting anytime between now and mid-July, you stand a good chance of seeing puffins. We do a lot with these schools, and actually we're improving the journey that these potentially young conservationists of the future go through as they visit Lundy, as well as the engagement. We're setting tasks for them when they go back to school. This year we're going to run a seal championship, a seal champion competition. They're going to go away and promote the wonderful Atlantic grey seals that breed here on the island. We had a record 71 pups born last year. It's a really significant population here in the southwest. Sadly, they experience a little bit of disturbance from mankind, people inadvertently getting a bit too close, taking photographs, or maybe swimming in the water. And we're going to go into the schools and raise that profile, and they can help spread the word. So they're going to be making posters, blogs, poems, and we'll be announcing a winner and displaying all their wonderful artwork in our lovely St. Helens Church on the island. As well as the schools, we do a whole load of engagement, a bit like the talk I'm doing right now. Every sailing day, we've got stayers coming to the island, and myself or Tara will be in the wheelhouse down in the tavern, which is just below me in the office here. And we'll do a talk. I can go on for a little bit, to be honest with you. My talks easily go on for an hour as I get going about the island's birds, wildlife, livestock. And then we try and offer as many snorkel safaris as we can around the tides. Last year, we managed 19 safaris, taking out over 100 people diving or snorkeling underneath the jetty. Incredibly rich habitat, this artificial reef the jetty creates in the southeast of the island. Occasionally, weather means that these safaris have to be cancelled. Big easterly winds can stop sailings, and they can stop our snorkel safaris. But we are able to offer rock pool rambles, taking people out onto the shoreline, and Tara does a wonderful job of interpreting Lundy's marine protected area. So MPA there's a wonderful boundary that protects the island's waters, and it actually became England's first MPA. First as this voluntary status in the 70s, and a decade later gaining full statutory status. Actually, that jumped forward more recently. In 2003, our east coast became an NTZ, a no-take zone, the first of its kind in Britain. That stops any fishing, any exploitive activity. So you can't go lobster potting, you can't go angling. There's voluntary no anchorage zones in these areas. So the wildlife really thrives around Lundy. We also have guest speakers coming over. Here's a LFS member and very keen marine biologist here, Keith Hiscock, in the church, talking about some of his marine findings through the years. And we've just gone past the peak fungi season. It's been dark and damp through the winter. Lundy hosts over 860 different species of fungus. Incredible diversity given its very modest size, 3 miles long, half a mile wide at its widest point, with only a relatively few number of habitats. Lundy supports an incredible diversity of fungi owing to the way we carefully manage the land. It's not ploughed and pumped full of fertilizers. It's very carefully looked after. Thomas here in the red hat, you might just be able to spot him amongst all the faces there, is conducting a bird ringing demonstration in Milcombe. This is the valley you come up as you come off the boat on a day trip. And actually today, it's been a nice sunny, little bit windy from the east, but I've been setting up all of my mist nets in the valley. For those that have visited before, you may have noticed bird ringers safely catching birds, handling them, putting a little unique metal ring on the leg with a unique code, collecting measurements like wing lengths and weight to look at the health of these individuals. We learn where these populations are migrating, how long these birds are living, if migrations are becoming earlier, later, changes in climate affecting these populations. These ringing demos offer a great opportunity to showcase birds in a light that people probably haven't seen before. We've been busy in updating a lot of our interpretation as well. The boat building, along with Heartland International, wonderful new display panels thanks to the Penny legacy that was very kindly left to the island. So next time you visit, please do poke your head into the building. Lots of wonderful information that I just do not have the time to cram into this talk right now. Over on the west coast, the Battery has become one of the best places to look out for puffins. I've been working with all sorts of communities to make sure that we're respecting these populations. They're exploding all over the place. We've gone from 5 puffins at the turn of the century due to a rat problem. They arrived on the island on shipwrecks a couple of hundred years ago and were eating all the seabird eggs, eating chicks, in some cases even eating the adults. And we were getting to the point where our puffins were going to go locally extinct. We managed to remove the rodents just in the nick of time. The project finished in 2004, 5 puffins left. Last year, I estimated the population at 1,802 birds. In a 20-year time frame, that's a huge recovery. We also work really closely with the feral management stock. So we've got sika deer, goat, we've got soay sheep that roam the island, and these have all been introduced by previous owners of the island. They don't have natural predators. So it's actually the conservation team's responsibility, the island's responsibility, to make sure these populations are carefully controlled and managed. And we've increased our engagement around the activities we do. And it's a really interesting one. I love talking about it. I lead on the mainland, a vegan diet in an attempt to be sustainable where I can be, but it's a bit different here on Lundy. We've got this wonderful livestock that's out leading this totally organic life, can be controlled here on the island, processed here in the village, and ends up straight into the tavern. 0 road miles, carbon neutral food source. So I've been joining the management team. I even joined the butcher in our game larder, and I had an attempt at making some venison sausages last autumn. It just so happened that Tina Turner's Simply the Best was playing on the radio, so of course I had to label up my batch of sausages. So you never know. If you visit later this year, we'll make sure Warden's venison sausages makes it onto their board in the tavern. Touched a little bit on our seals briefly. Let's dig down into those numbers. Here's one of our lovely seal pups that's born on the island. They love that southeast coast. So hopefully you can see my cursor. The pinkish lines to mark the key pupping areas. They love the southeastern sector of the island. It's very sheltered from those prevailing southwesterlies that we are exposed to. We had a record-breaking 71 pups born on the island. Most of those are in September, but with climate change, that's actually happening earlier and earlier. It used to be September, October would have been your peak months, but now August is matching like for like with October. We had quite a high mortality last year. This was down to some fairly severe weather. We had a named storm, and then in September, some pretty harsh easterlies that coincided with some big spring tides. But this is what all our important fieldwork tells us. We've got a really stable adult population, typically sits around 220 individuals, and we know each seal because they've got unique markings. The pattern, particularly around the neck here, can be photographed and catalogued. And we get movements of known seals going from Lundy to Ireland, Cornwall, going back to North Devon, all monitored because of their pattern. Sadly, last year, slightly higher mortality rate than usual, but that was owing to the weather. So fingers crossed this year we'll have a much better season. In fact, here's some of the numbers I was talking about. So we're middling last year, about 207, just ever so slightly down on the median count. We had a couple of sightings. Here's the markings I was talking about. They look a bit of a mess to the untrained eye, but to a very keen seal recorder, you can actually track birds that have gone into rehabilitation. So we've got the lovely bobbinet here. There's Tutti Frutti, also seen last year, that were rescued by organisations like the British Divers Marine Life Rescue. And they release these seals once they're fit and healthy again. Typically a site in North Devon, and they go on to live wonderful lives in and around Lundy. Sadly, we see a few entanglements, so I do what I can to record these. Typically involves around ghost fishing lines. We had one flying ring last year as well. Those are the frisbees with the donut shape, the gap in the middle and just the ring. We're working really closely with other seal organisations, the Seal Alliance, Cornwall Research Trust, to actually petition a ban on the sale of these flying rings because they're not great for marine wildlife. Other issues, just staying on that trend, but we're working incredibly hard with local water users, increasing the promotion of good practices, avoiding use of drones around sensitive areas, working with charter boats to make sure we are taking out groups to enjoy our seals in a responsible manner, not trying to get too close, prod and give seals a big hug. Not only is it going to be detrimental to the seals, but actually there's going to be disease transmission potentially to humans as well. So it's putting a few people at risk. That's where our engagement and going to the schools is making a massive difference. We've also been pulling together more codes of conduct, just increasing our presence, and it's making a massive difference. Touching a bit more on the land, hopefully you can make out the wonderful kooky in between Laura, myself, and Tessa. I was just chatting to Tessa this morning actually about biosecurity update. So this is basically keeping Lundy and other seabird islands rat-free. The RSPB run an organisation called the Biosecurity, and they've recently got a new team member, rat detection dog, Kooky. Just on a routine case scenario, someone managed to, I can call up a load of volunteers and make sure we stay rodent free. It would undo all that hard work 2002 to 2004, making sure we're protecting our wonderful seabird colony. Pleased to report, last year we had 0 rodent scares at all. That means there were no signs detected whatsoever. We have quite a tight system we run. Everything is hand loaded onto our ship, the wonderful MS Oldenburg, to fishing vessel that's even outside the MPA. It could be that one jump ship swims over to Lundy, one pregnant female, and we could be in trouble. So I'm always monitoring. I've got wax blocks out that I melt down with chocolate. I've got new tech I'm trialing actually. So just today, Biosecurity for Life sent me over some new trail cameras to try. I've got a brand new song meter. I'm going to be, so I haven't even had a look at setting this up yet. So it's actually going to record audio. So we'll be listening out for rodents calling. They've got really high pitch frequencies, and we'll be able to pick those out, and early warning signs will just mean I'm on the case and make sure we stay rodent free. It's all very low risk, but I can't rest on those laurels that we've been rat free for 20 years. We've got to maintain that vigilance. A little head scratcher for me last year was being sent a photo of this common lizard. Now, Lundy is amphibian and reptile free, or it was until the turn of the century, and slowworms started to make an appearance. Could be that they made it over naturally and highly unlikely, but maybe they came over in compost. We never truly know, but they certainly didn't have a detrimental impact on the island. Somehow last year, a common lizard made it over to our reptile-free island. I'm going to do a lot more survey work this year. We're going to put out some refugia, basically places they might bask, looking for potential lizard sighting. Could they have made it over naturally? It's possible. Maybe a bird brought it over. Maybe it came over on the ship, but that seems highly unlikely. So if you come over, keep your eyes peeled and let me know what you see. We do a lot of practical work parties on the island as well to stay rhododendron free. This is a non-native plant that was introduced to the UK by Victorians. Sadly, is very detrimental to native wildlife. And you can see all this colorized area is land that we've worked really carefully with the Lundy Field Society volunteers, walking every inch, pulling up every little seedling that's coming up. There's been a big push in the last 20-25 years to remove vast forests of rhododendron that covered the east coast. We're getting to the point now where I think a non-flowering year is on the cards, and it's just going to be couple of years of pulling up seedlings, making sure we stay vigilant and stop the recurrence of rhododendron. I send volunteers out with myself, the ranger, across the plateau. They can't scale down the cliffs with a spade in hand, so we actually get rope access experts over. Peninsula are due to come in a couple of weeks. They'll be scaling our east cliffs and removing all those pesky little plants that we can't access on foot. We've got the wonderful Lundy cabbage as well, and we do annual counts here. Alan and Sandra Rowland, members of the Lundy Field Society, counting the cabbage. We had a pretty median year again last year, just shy of 2,300 plants recorded. We were slightly late in our survey for a couple of reasons. If you account for the about 50% flowering, we land at 3,000 plants recorded, which is about average for our wonderful Lundy cabbage. It's an endemic species. It's a fancy word for saying its entire global range is on Lundy. It's unique to the island. You can only find it between Tibbets, halfway up the island on the east coast, down to the landing bay. That's its entire global range. I've been bringing in Bug Life, another charity, to survey a couple of beetles that are also unique to the plant. We've got the Lundy flea beetle and the Lundy weevil. Both rely on the cabbage. So staying rhododendron free is key, not only just to promote wildlife and diversity, but to protect the very precious Lundy cabbage. Also been working with the climbing community. Seabirds are now coming out of our ears. It's amazing, but it does mean I need to start closing off previously year-round climbing sites, just because you're going to end up treading on a puffin if you're not careful. And it's been I've been blown away by the community, actually. And you can see here I was actually scaling Devil's Slide, one of the island's famous climbs, with a Southampton group. They went away from their holiday. I got excited about climbing and they got excited about wildlife. You might just be able to make out on the slide. They went away, bought a bird book, bought their first pair of binoculars and said, "This is your fault, Joe. And what have you started?" It's wonderful to see so many people come to the island, enjoy everything it has to offer, and also do so responsibly. Obviously, I can't mention a work party without showing our wonderful Lundy Field Society volunteers searching for rhododendron. We have to keep a line, make sure we work every inch for those little seedlings that pop up. I do treat them to other jobs, and actually, last autumn they were building or repairing our Manx shearwater boxes. So these are seabirds that breed on the west coast. They're set into the ground with a meter tube that comes through the soil that they'll crawl through in the middle of the night. They're active then to avoid predation. Sort of a shoebox-sized opening that I can peer in and monitor this very secretive bird. And we can track egg laying dates, hatching dates, survival rates for chicks. We handled over 1,000 Manx shearwaters last year, which is a record for the island, and correlates with the exponential increase thanks to that rat eradication. We have 95% of England's breeding Manx shearwaters on Lundy. So these boxes that the Lundy Field Society helped repair offer a really valuable insight to their breeding season. Lundy, and the top right here, recently joined the Bird Observatory network. So we used to be a bird obs, and it does exactly what it says on the tin, a bird obs. It's a site that's dedicated to observing, watching birds, migration, breeding, lots of different scientific studies. And back in February, we joined the Bird Obs Council AGM into our second year of probation. So as of next February, we should be voted in as a fully fledged bird obs once again. After a 50-year hiatus, Lundy used to be part of this network through most of the 40s, 50s and 60s. But sadly, at the time, funding meant that focus strayed away from bird recording and we lost that status. Bird obs are so important for collecting really scientific data, very standardized. We've got a census route that we cover. On my next slide here, you can see every morning, myself and the wonderful volunteers we get over record this wonderful survey route encompassing most of the habitats in the southern quarter of the island. This can take a couple hours to do thoroughly, and it ends up with this really rigorous data set that you just wouldn't otherwise have. And that will go on to inform all sorts of environmental policy across the country. We covered census 90% or 97% of days. Basically, 1 or 2 days of absolutely foggy weather meant I couldn't even see my hands. It just meant surveying was a blank. A record 169 different species of bird were found on Lundy last year. That also record-breaking numbers, thanks to the increased coverage the observatory status has provided. Just shy. I was aiming to ring 5,000 birds last year. 16 shy of the record set in 2009, so I'll have to up my game this season. One of my favourite parts of the job is leading the daily evening wildlife log. So at 8 o'clock every evening, I'll sit down with actually the wildlife book's in the tavern at the moment. I'll show you last year's book, hard copy. It's got, in fact, wonderful photos that people have printed out. And most importantly, let's go to a quick page for you, a log of thick list of all the different species. We meticulously note locations, number of individuals, and this all gets collated and reported by the OBS and some of the data goes to the Lundy Field Society as well. I'm probably going to be short on time, so I'll run you through some very quick wildlife sightings from last year. This here is a woodcock that we were recording during our nocturnal surveys. I've got a thermal imager. I walk around in the middle of the night recording, catching, ringing a lot of these nocturnal waders. This here was a green-winged teal, second record for the island. This is actually an American duck that spent a few months on Ponsbury, the largest freshwater body in the middle of the island. At one point, it was paired up with a female teal, and I thought we might get some quirky hybrid offsprings, but unfortunately got outcompeted by one of our local Eurasian teals and disappeared early April. This might look like a generic seagull to some of you online, but actually, this is a rather rare Iceland gull. There's lots of different species of gulls. Most of them, you might be surprised to hear, are actually really endangered. The birds we've got breeding here, kittiwakes, the large gulls like herring gull, great blackback, you might see some of these in your towns and cities, those larger gulls. They're actually some of the most endangered species in the country, many of them red listed. Populations are in free fall. So doing everything we can to make sure Lundy stays rodent free. We're monitoring productivity to make sure these populations are thriving in the small pockets that they're allowed to flourish. Other unusual birds we encountered last year, a wonderful one of two night herons in Milcombe, short-toed larks stuck around in the autumn. My favourite bird of the year, a Pallas's warbler on the east coast. The old quarries that worked in the 1860s now support wonderful rarities like this. Far eastern migrant, really coming from Siberia and further east. Gorgeous little bird, not much bigger than a gold crest. Other unusual birds like potchard and pallid swift, second record for the island last November. And maybe one that got away, little brown job. This is probably a pied flycatcher, but it could be a more unusual collared fly. Some birds are so similar in plumage, and the overlap between species can be so much that actually we need to look at the DNA to get to the bottom of identification. And this bird came and went, and we're probably never going to know. Lots of other wonderful notable species, shrikes, woodchat and red-backed, golden orioles galore in Milcombe through the spring. We've got ortolan bunting, bottom right, subalpine warbler skulking away in the gorse, top right, and one of a couple red-breasted flycatchers we had in the autumn. Just a hint of what happens on Lundy. Rarities are nice, but really what gets me going are some of the influxes and big migration days. We had a massive, for Lundy and actually a national average, influx of snow bunting. 44 birds were seen on one day. We ended up ringing 12 birds on the island. Bear in mind, 1 or 2 get ringed nationally every year. It was an incredible arrival of these wonderful, you can actually see snow bunting here on my image, bottom right. And we had a great seabird influx as well in the autumn. Quarry shearwater, over about 24-hour period, 72 birds just storming past the southeast coast. A bird we very rarely see. It was associated with big, unusual foraging that was taking place in the wider southwest approaches and Celtic Deep. Some of the ringing we do leads to fantastic recovery. So we were part of a national project collecting data on this rather wonderful yellow-browed warbler. This is a bird again that breeds over towards Siberia and Russia, arrives in the UK in the winter. In the last couple of years, it's becoming more abundant in the winter, and we don't really know why. Are these birds pioneers creating a new migration route? Are they being displaced? We don't know. And Lundy was the first first site to have a recovery elsewhere. And our bird, 11 days later, so this bird here was trapped and safely ringed, released in Milcombe in the southeast of the island. 11 days later, was seen by a birder with a camera on Scillies. Amazing distance. We were then blown away by a bird that was ringed in Shetland and found on Anglesey a couple of weeks later. Unbelievable data. We would love to see these birds then seen on migration and maybe even found on breeding grounds in the Far East. A lot of the nocturnal work I do ends up seeing things like bar-tailed godwit and other ringing records like short-eared owl was definitely a highlight we found on the airfield, golden plover all over the plateau, and other rarities like golden oriole and nightingale. This year, I'm going to look at studying the large gulls. Like I say, they're in decline. So we're going to put, as well as the little metal ring, these color rings on the other leg with a unique number. So we'll actually be able to identify the individuals just by even the naked eye or binoculars, camera. We'll be able to understand their movements, their longevity, and maybe figure out what, unfortunately, is causing their decline. Is it other diseases? Is it lack of food? These additional sightings are going to be invaluable to get to the bottom of what's going on. Talked about our wonderful Manx shearwaters earlier. Next year, we'll be doing an all-island count. This year, I'm focusing on puffins, guillemots, razorbills, kittiwakes. We'll look at shearwaters in the coming years. And here's those nest boxes again. We've got wonderful insight into their story. Here's a little Manx shearwater chick. It takes 52 days from hatching to getting to a full-grown adult like we saw there. They spend their winter in South America. In fact, I had a recovery of one of our birds in Brazil this winter, and they're slowly making their way up the Americas at the moment or across the Atlantic over the coming weeks. Incredible birds. They've got a smaller cousin called the storm petrel, and on this rather windy summer's, well, it's not very summery there, summer's day, we were installing storm petrel boxes, again, to get an insight into this really understudied species. We had some unusual breeding records. The first ever confirmed yellow wagtails breeding on Lundy. Even better, because the female was a blue-headed yellow wagtail, which is the continental subspecies, adding a little bit extra prestige to the breeding record. And here are the young chicks. There was a nest that successfully fledged 4 young. So we went in when the chicks were the right age, collected a few measurements and put them back in the nest. And they all hatched, fledged, and stuck around for a couple of weeks and then went on their way. Will they return? Time will tell. Wheat ears are another success story of the rat eradication project. Bumper year. This is a ground nesting bird that we colour ring to understand the adult survival. These birds go down to Africa for the winter. A small little robin-sized bird makes huge journeys. The first birds are turning back up in the UK now, and actually, just 2 days ago, I had the first colouring bird back on territory at Courtawall on the west coast. Over the next few weeks, and months, I'll be watching these birds very closely, trying to read every ring sequence possible, which is quite a lot of work because there's a huge number of pairs within our recording area, from the castle all the way up to halfway wall, which is only a quarter of the potential breeding habitat of the island, and that supports 69 pairs. Huge number we get breeding here thanks to that rat-free status. Puffins starting to return now to the land. One of the best places to watch them is Jenny's Cove. You can see this is where my volunteers are set up. They invite staying guests, day trippers to come over to Jenny's, look through our telescopes, and the puffins are on some of the slopes like this here. Wonderful views through the scope. They also do productivity studies, a bit like the seals. They had quite a poor season last year, predominantly down to the weather. It was a cold and wet summer. It meant that a lot of chicks sadly just didn't survive, but the adult survival rate is high. We did a large survey last year with worries of bird flu, highly pathogenic avian influenza, HPAI, or bird flu. We're worried that some of our seabirds might be dying off, but that's certainly not the case. Guillemots, razorbills, puffins, these are all of the auks. They're all going massive population increases. This is comparing data like for like last year in Jenny's Cove alone. So in just one bay, there's nearly 800 puffins. Bear in mind that was 20 years ago. Unbelievable. Fulmar, you may have noticed, are in the red. They're as part of a wider national population crash, and the timing of this survey was mainly to target these other cliff nesters, Fulmar, later in the season, so that might just account for some of the larger percentage decreases there. I take out a lot of people on guided bird walks and wider wildlife walks. It was lovely to see in the logbook this watercolour. Someone was staying in one of the castle properties and they thoroughly enjoyed their nocturnal wanderings around the field, seeing us safely catch, ring, study and release wheat ears. This here being a juvenile that fledged the island and was feeding out on the top of the plateau. I better let Derek start talking because I've done my classic and probably overrun. I hope to see you all on the island this year, in the coming years. Please do let me know any wildlife you see, flowering plants, fungi. Birds is obviously going to get me super excited. Marine sightings, anything you encounter is of interest to us. We've got a little logbook that's in the tavern, and you can write in any of your records or come speak to one of our team. Hope you enjoyed that. Any questions, please just type them in the comment section. I'm sure there's a box for you somewhere, but I'd better hand over to Derek. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks for that. Yeah, let me see if I can get my screen to share. You didn't do too bad. I was expecting you to be gone another 10 minutes or so.
I was quite strict on myself.
Screen sharing. Okay. All right. There we go. Hopefully you can see that, Joe. Just give me a shout.
Yeah, that looks great, Derek.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Joe. And good evening, folks. And as Alison said earlier on, my name is Derek Green. I'm the Lundy Managing Director. And thank you for joining us tonight. So I had around 30 minutes to talk to you, but I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. So I'm going to talk to you in a little while just about Lundy's aspirations for renewable energy. But just first of all, I'm conscious that some folk may not have been to Lundy before. And just to give you an idea of what the sort of activities we were up to last year, how the island done, I'm just going to give you a whistle-stop tour of what we've been up to in 2024, some of the things that have been happening recently, and what we hope to achieve next year. So strap yourself in. This is going to be a very quick presentation, just to hopefully keep your interest. Okay, I'm conscious that some people may not know where Lundy is, or may not even have been to Lundy in the past. So we sit just off the North Devon coast there, and we're about 25 miles from Ilfracombe, about 23 miles from Bideford by sea on our passenger and supply ship MS Oldenburg. And we can also fly to Lundy during the winter months by helicopter from our base at Hartland Point there. It takes about 6 minutes, so it's a lot quicker to fly than it is to sail. But of course, the Oldenburg is only in service during the summer months when the weather is meant to be better. So Lundy, as you may know, is Old Norwegian for Puffin Island, Lund meaning Puffin, and A meaning island, and so collectively we get Lundy. And if you look at the island itself here, you can see we've got this very dramatic west coast where all Joe's birds are, and the most of the population on our properties, including our landmarks, is situated in the southeast of the island, other than Tibbets, which is halfway up the east coast. So I'm going to just take you through some of the aspects of Lundy. It's a very complex place, and there's always an awful lot going on. We just talked about attendance, sailings and flights last year, property occupancy, our wonderful staff that help keep the island ship and shore offices running. I'll touch on the Oldenburg and activities with her and where she is at the moment. What we've done with water on the island, because we're completely self-sustainable, sustaining rather, for water and power. Touch on maintenance, a little bit about farming and how that's changing on Lundy and what that means for us. Some of the events that we get up to over the year. A little bit about Heartland International Helipad. If you've been there, you'll know what I mean. And then we'll look ahead to next year, and then I'll give you a brief update on our aspirations for renewable energy. So attendance-wise, last year, we measure our footfall by passenger numbers. And you can see here that the total number of passengers that we either flew or sailed across to Lundy last year was about 15,500. The previous year it was 13,500, and that was simply because the Oldenburg was out of service for longer than expected due to a flooding incident at the dry dock. So last year we brought over just over 9,000 day trippers and 5,500 staying visitors. And you can see here clearly the summer months are more popular than the winter for very obvious reasons. We scheduled 101 sailings for Oldenburg from the beginning of April to the end of October. But unfortunately, there was a 2-week delay as a result of mechanical work that had to be completed at the dry dock. Coupled with bad weather last year, it wasn't a great sailing year. We had 26 cancellations, and I'm sure if you holidayed in the UK in August and September or July, you'll remember those storms that we faced quite unseasonably. We also had 10 weather delays where we sailed from Ilfracombe or Bideford, but we had to delay the sailing because of weather, which meant we couldn't take day trippers across the island, which was disappointing itself. The winter helicopter service was scheduled to fly on 37 days from November through to the end of March, and we had 5 weather cancellations, usually as a result of fog. Helicopter can fly in most weathers other than poor visibility. So that's a standard year for helicopters, but quite a poor year for the ship. You can see the day trip numbers broken down here, and you can see how we compared against 2023. But you can also see those really poor months in August and July, where the weather really took its toll year on year. Staying visit numbers were fairly constant on the previous years, of course, because we ended up flying more people over in 2023 as we did 24. So we were well supported in the 23 landmarks and the vestry that we let out on the island to folks. So it was quite a good year for our properties. I'm always proud of our occupancy levels, so we measured that by percentage. Last year we hit 88% of all nights booked on the island against available nights. So that's quite remarkable given where we are and how difficult it is to get to Lundy. You can see there the year before we achieved a massive 90%, but there was a little bit of post-COVID bubble still hanging around from that because Lundy books quite heavily in advance. And so there was a bit of hangover from COVID in there. 88%, however, is still a remarkable occupancy rate for anybody that's letting properties, and always trying to beat the mainland, as the landmark guys will tell you. You can see here all of our properties and the percentage of occupancy, Old House North being the most popular. And the barn, of course, is our bunkhouse, which sleeps 14 people in a dormitory. So quite understandably, down at 54% there. But nonetheless, a great result all around. Now, there's quite a mixture of different skills that are required to operate and manage a place like Lundy. And this is the team pretty much at the moment. You can see the guys in blue there on the left-hand side. They're the ship's crew who double up as ground crew for the helicopter service because the skills are transferable. We've got our wonderful shore office and marketing team on the right in orange. And down below, we've got the island team who all live and work on Lundy. And for them, it's home. You can see the 7 departments down there that help to run the island. So, whoops. Moving on to the ship. Here's our wonderful old girl, Oldenburg. And last year she had quite a journey with mechanical issues and upgrades and one thing and another. The Oldenburg is in fact in the dry dock at the moment, and she's sailing tonight, as it happens by sheer coincidence, from Sharpness at 10:30, bound for Bideford. So the crew are getting ready to depart as we speak, and they'll be sailing overnight and bringing the ship back to Bideford in the morning. Over the last 12 months, we've had quite a lot of work done to the ship with new gearboxes in February, March, April last year. And we've also been evaluating how long the ship may remain in service. So I'm going to talk briefly about that. And also the work that we've been doing on the ship over the last 4 to 5 months when she's been in the dry dock. I'll also mention briefly the SLEP report that we're carrying out at the moment. And this gives us an idea of how long the ship may remain in service. And then I'll talk to you about how we've been managing to supply the island during the Oldenburg's absence. So when it became apparent that Oldenburg had quite a lot of work to carry out over the last couple of years, local shipyard Halland and Wolff have been working with us closely just to give us an idea about what it would take to replace the Oldenburg as and when the day comes. So don't get too excited. This is not happening overnight, but we met with them late last year and they've come up with some plans, which I'm quite happy to share with you now. It gives you an idea of what a replacement Oldenburg might look like when the time comes. Of course, we're quite a distance away from that yet, but this gave us an idea of what to expect and let us scope out the specification for a new ship when the time comes. And it just shows that we can still build in this country something that kind of fits the bill for Lundy and looks traditionally classic in the same way that Oldenburg does at the moment. It'll also give us an idea of what the cost and time frame considerations would be if we were to replace the Oldenburg at some point in the future. But of course, that's a long way away yet. And so just to understand what the future holds for Oldenburg in the next few years, we've commissioned this company, Safeguard Nautica, to review what's called a SLEP report. And this is a ship's life extension program, originally carried out in 2017 ahead of the lease renewal with the National Trust. And this presented options for us to keep the ship in service for 15 years with a staged review at year 10 rather. From that, we're fortunate enough to get partnership funding from colleagues in the National Trust, which helps keep the ship in service with financial support for her maintenance. The flooding incident that happened a few years ago, however, has provided a refurbished engine room for the ship, and all the machinery has since been replaced or refurbished. Coupled with the recent deck replacement program, this has further extended the life of the ship. So we want to know what really lies ahead of us in terms of Oldenburg. Hence, we've contracted this report to be completed. It's one of the most frequent questions I get asked. So we're expecting that report to be due in the summer, and that will give both the National Trust and Landmark and the Lundy Company some options for future consideration. Where's the ship been over the last few months? Well, she goes to Sharpness, further up the Bristol Channel, every year. And then the last couple of years, we've been replacing the decks of the ship, seen here from above. You can see the after deck, the top boat deck, and the foredeck there. And we've been replacing the steel on the after deck and the foredeck over the last 2 years. And all of that work is now complete. Just some pictures here of work in progress, and replacing quite a lot of sections on that exposed foredeck in particular, and more recently. So pleased to say that work is complete. And as I said, she's sailing from Sharpness tonight. While she's been gone, we've been fortunate enough to get support from the Severn Seas Shipping Company with their little coaster, the Mare. You may have seen her over at Lundy on a weekly basis or in Bideford loading up. And she's been bringing fuel, supplies, stores. And here she's bringing sheep off of the island on her way back to Bideford. And this was in January. She's ex-Trinity House, so you can see she's built to withstand some of the weather we get at Lundy. And we're fortunate that she's perfectly placed there to support us at times when Oldenburg is out of service. On the island, we've been doing more work to the water treatment plant. You may know that we've got a new water tank that's substantially increased the reservoir on the top of the island, again with help with support from the National Trust. And over the winter, we've just been upgrading the controls and improving the quality of the water in the plant, completing some pipe work to those new tanks and installing some new components. More recently, something called a scavenger, and this takes all the coloration out of the water, and it's improved the quality all over. So we now have got very clear drinking water on Lundy, and potable and treated. So really delighted to get to that point. Most of the focus over the last 12 months on Lundy has been on energy conservation. We've had lots of new windows made by a local company in Bideford, and they've all been shipped across over the end of the sailing season last year. And Robida Joinery have done a terrific job, worked for Landmark and many mainland properties in the past, and we've replaced windows in Castle Cottage and in Hamners, and both the St John's and the Barn, Quarters, Bramble Villas, Paradise Row, known as Pigs. If you know Lundy well, you'll know where I mean. And also in the Barn Flat where Joe Bird lives. We've also had new sash windows, but these are single glazed units for the Morisco's offices. And all in all, we've worked quite hard to conserve all the heating and energy in the buildings, and it's been a significant step change for us. So no more rattly windows or newspapers stuffed in the cracks in these properties. And we'd hope to continue with that programme in the coming years. Other maintenance and improvements across the island. We've been listening very carefully to a lot of the feedback that we get from you guys when you come to stay with us. If you send back, an online feedback form, or whether it's one of our hard copies, it's all really important stuff. And you can see down the left-hand side all of the work that's gone into improving the island, and it never stops on Lundy. It's the Forth Road Bridge in a way, and the maintenance team are continually working to improve our properties. And of course, I guess that kind of runs quite highly with our high level of occupancy as well. So people are clearly enjoying what we're doing. Properties are in good condition, and we're listening to what you're telling us. The other thing to mention there is that the new interpretation that Joe mentioned earlier on has been spread across several areas of the operation. We've also been working on St Helens, the island church, as we work closely with the PCC, because we let the vestry out on their behalf, which brings income into the diocese, which helps to maintain the church. And that's a useful resource for the island, not just for the vestry accommodation, but the conservation team and engagement team use the nave of the church for visiting schools, and there's interpretation in there as well. So it's one of the largest buildings on the island. And after we refurbished it in 2017, we're carefully looking after it So the vestry's had a makeover, and really pleased to get the ground clearance work completed on there as well. Joe mentioned farming. It's a big part of what we do on Lundy. Since COVID, we've seen a bit of a population explosion on the island, not just in the feral stock, but because of our lack of ability to get sheep off the island, we've seen quite a lot of increase in numbers. And you may know that Lundy relies quite heavily on some of the subsidies that we've been getting over the years. Single farm payments are now coming to an end. So we're looking to try and replace that with a new higher level stewardship scheme, working with the National Trust. And this will provide a new farm management plan, which is currently under review. We can expect from that the stock level on the island across all of the different breeds will change. We'll see a decrease in sheep number and probably an increase in some cattle, doing a slightly different type of conservation grazing. The new scheme, hopefully if accepted, will have more of a focus on nature and conservation, and less of a focus on intense sort of grazing that we've seen with high numbers of sheep and low numbers of rabbits on the island. It's a very positive move for the island, and I hope you'll get a chance to visit and come and see the results of that when it comes into place. There's also been a lot of work on replacing and repairing the walls across the island after a very, very wet winter last year, and landscaping improvements across the island as well. So Lundy's in good shape, and it's just setting itself up to be in even better shape in the future. Last year was quite a challenge to replace some of the island's vehicles as they came of age. It's a very harsh environment on the island with the salt laden air that we get. It tends to rust everything twice as quick. It's quite a harsh environment to be driving vehicles around as well. And so we had to replace a trusty cargo tractor, which is the stalwart of bringing everything on and off the island. The fire tender replaced by Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue, who we work with and for, providing all the emergency services on the island. And our fire bowser was also refurbished and replaced last year as well. We took the opportunity to send our diesel fuel bowser off, and more about that in a minute, for refurbishment. And our first response Coast Guard vehicle was sent off and brought back as well. So a lot of vehicle movements on and off Lundy. But the most important one, of course, is this. And this is our island rib, which has only just come back to North Devon after being away for a year to be refurbished. And that will allow the conservation team to do all of their important monitoring work with sales, engagement, and of course, counting Lundy cabbage and all that sort of stuff. To get vehicles on and off of Lundy is normally on the Odenburg, but some of these vehicles are a little bit too heavy for the crane. So we rely on local friends. This time, Landing Craft had just happened to be in Harland Wolff, the shipyard, for repair and repainting, and had to go out for some sea trials. So we took the opportunity to pull in a favour, and she replaced the tractor and the fire truck for us. Here we see the old ones just coming back into Appledore. Events on the island, there's always something happening on Lundy. There's never a dull moment, and we get quite a few cruise ships visiting. But last year, delighted to see an old friend from back home, the Waverley, visiting Lundy. And this picture is actually taken just off of Appledore, but it's such a nice picture. You can see how many people are on there. On her way back from Lundy, she paid Biddy for the visit and just spun around outside the shore office. She'll be back again this coming year. And if you do get a chance, I mean, it's great to come in the Odenburg, but a pasture on the Waverley is something else. It's really special. Great to see her at Lundy as well. Bring back so many memories of my younger days. We also had our annual trail run where 250 of these brave souls decided to descend on us for one day in July, as they do every year now, and complete the half marathon on Lundy. So 14 miles around the island. It's quite difficult when it's only 3 miles long and half a mile wide, but they do it 3 times. It's pretty crazy if you ask me, but they all seem to be determined and come back every year. It's always a good event, but not for the faint-hearted, I should add. The fly-in happens every year and is normally very successful with small aircraft arriving. Last year, however, we did have one casualty, but pleased to say the pilot was safe and well after he had a little bit of a lumpy landing, let's say. This plane was on the island for quite some time and became a feature. I think at one point I thought that Natural England or English Heritage were going to come along and schedule it. It had been there so long. Pleased to say they repaired it and it flew off on its merry way. And hopefully we'll see him again next year with a little bit more of a careful landing. Over at Heartland International, we've done quite a lot of work to the landscaping over there in recent years, and it was time to turn to the building itself, looking at the departure lounge, and it gets just as much exposure to the weather as Lundy does, so it takes a hammering, and we're pleased to be able to replace some of the windows there as well with double glazed units. Internally, it was refurbished, and we see more of our new interpretation at Heartland if you've passed through the heliport at some point over the winter. Bringing you up to date, of course, we issue a new set of stamps every 2 years. Lundy operates the world's longest running private postal service. And just last week, we issued our latest stamps, and these are celebrating the newly joined membership of the Lundy Bird Observatory Council, and really delighted with our offering here. Local artist and member of the Lundy Field Society, Sharon Reid, in fact, designed and painted and coloured the stamps, and these were issued last week. Of course, our currency is still Puffin, and Lundy Postal Service will be celebrating its 100th anniversary in 2029, so something to look forward to for the future. Of course, there's another anniversary coming up this year, and this is the Landmark Trust's 60th anniversary. And we're very fortunate in that one of our patrons kindly donated half of a hogshead of whiskey for us to raise some funds towards our property restoration and some projects on the mainland and on Lundy. And it's one of the more kind of obscure parts of my job is to bring this to the shelf. So for all of your whiskey fans out there, I have tasted this and I can guarantee you won't be disappointed. So this is the commercial break. If you are interested in one of these bottles, it will be a limited edition. There's only 144 of them going to be available, and it's going to be a first come, first serve. So if you want to put your name on a very long list, then please send us an email to the Lundy Shore office, please. I'm pretty sure that this is going to be quite popular. Looking ahead to 2025, there's always lots of project work on Lundy. We've got work planned for the workshop roof to encapsulate that. Milcombe House is in the middle of exterior refurbish at the minute. We're introducing a small microgrid into Tibbets, and Stonycroft is going to feature as a pilot with a new air source heat pump. I mentioned the higher level stewardship change to farming practices and the Landmark's 60th anniversary. We're also moving towards period return tickets for the Oldenburg, and that will be available online hopefully by the end of the summer. And we're busy working with colleagues in the marine protected area to construct and launch a new website. So keep an eye out for that as well. And of course, the big news for Lundy in terms of our direction of travel is our new renewable energy project. I'm really pleased at how this is progressing. And just last week, we launched a new web page on our website. So if you have a look at that when you get a chance, hopefully it will answer most of the questions that you'll have about our plans for Lundy. But I'm just going to show you some slides now about where we are and where we hope to get to. So for many years, Lundy has relied on diesel, and we have to ship this across on the hold and tanks of Oldenburg, pump it into a fuel bowser, then drag it up the hill into these fuel tanks that you can see here on the bottom right of your screen. And we use 160,000 litres per year, which is an amazing amount of fuel. And that's with us burning fuel just for 18 hours per day. So in partnership with our colleagues in the National Trust, we are hoping to decarbonise Lundy, and we want to reduce that reliance on diesel fuel in the next couple of years. So our idea is to introduce renewables, and the programme that we put together, which we're already partway through, is to pretty much start with improving and make efficient the existing diesel system and make it fit for purpose, which has been completed. Make the heating system on the island more efficient, which has happened already. Upgrade the controls in the control room, which looks after the heating and power across the island, and run a couple of pilot projects. And that's happened. We've put in some new storage heaters into Little St John's, and there's an air source heat pump going into Stonycroft in September. It also gives us the opportunity to put some remote access onto the island, and we've now got a team of engineers in Glasgow and a team in Newton Abbot who can keep an eye on the Lundy system from afar and make any small tweaks that we need to get the most efficient system running and get it running as efficiently as possible. We're just about to start pre-consultation, and planning application is being put together for a new energy system, and we would hope to submit that at some time in the summer. Following the successful granting of planning, we will hope to then tender some the works for the new renewable system in October, and that coincides with hopefully funding from the National Trust to cover the cost of the project, and all being well, we'll start installing in March next year. With a fair wind and adding in the Lundy factor, and if you've been to Lundy, you'll know what I mean, we would hope to commission the new system in October 2026. So we're a distance away, but we're making great inroads, and the work that's gone in already has significantly improved the power system on the island over the last couple of months. Since we changed the main control, the PLC in January, the system's been a lot more stable than it's ever been. We now have 3 generators all singing quite sweetly together, and great support from the mainland, and some up-to-date modern touch screen technology, which lets us see exactly what's happening and where. So we future-proofed the system, and the next stage is to add on some renewables to reduce that reliance on fuel. So how did we decide what to put in? Well, there was 5 options when we sat down and thought about this. And the first one you can see there, number 1, was just to replace the diesels like for like. The second option was to put in some solar and a battery on top of the diesels. The third option was to put some wind and a battery with the diesels. The fourth option was to put all 3 media in there with diesels. And the fifth option was to put solar and wind, but not to put a battery in. And if you quickly look to the bottom line of each of these options, you quickly see that the most cost-effective and the most reduction-wise scheme was number 4. It gives us the best output of all of the options, and it reduces the amount of diesel that we're going to use, and the cost, of course, by far the most. If we can achieve that, then we are looking to reduce our diesel use by over 85%, which will be quite something for the island. Of course, it will also mean pretty much silent running as well, so we won't have those generators pumping away 18 hours a day, and all of that pollution that comes with it. The idea is that we will introduce a small wind turbine, pretty much the same as we had there previously, but it will only be big enough to produce the island's needs. This is not going to be a monster. It's going to be quite a small scale turbine. It's going to be 100 kilowatts, and that will run in parallel with some solar panels that will sit in the High Street field. You can see here in the black lines. And then there will be a battery store to store all of this renewable energy and feed it back into the island's energy system. There'll also be thermal accumulators, which will capture any waste heat, and they will get transferred back into the island's heating system. So there'll be no waste at all. And the system is designed just to produce enough energy for the island's needs and no more, because we're not connected to the grid, so we don't have to over generate, as it were. What would that look like on the ground? Well, here's a picture from the top of the old light for those that have been to Lundy before, and I'm sure you recognise this. You can see Stonycroft in the foreground. You can see where the previous turbine base was, and that's still there. And that's where we are looking to put our new turbine. Our solar arrays will sit in High Street Field, just behind the water tanks there, and the battery building in front of Tom's landing shed there. All connecting into the generator shed on the top right there. And if we get planning, this is the type of turbine we expect to be fitting onto the island. And you can see here how it compares to the aerogenerator that was in place a number of years ago. And of course, it has to be a tiltable turbine for Lundy, because we can't get a huge crane onto the island in order to maintain or service it. So it's got to be able to lower on a hinge so that we can work on it and keep it in operation. Of course, to get through planning, there's quite a lot of work already gone in, and lots of surveys and consultations have already taken place. And you can see everything on the left here that we've been looking at with contractors over the last 12 to 18 months. And some of those surveys continue to be collecting data at the moment. And as you see on there, we're keen to make sure that we consult with everybody and we don't miss anything. We've been working with all the statutory agencies for some time. But if there's anything you think we've missed, then please let us know. We want to make sure that what we do for Lundy is the right thing, whereas we, adding renewables and removing a reliance on diesel, we want to make sure that we don't upset the balance on the island, and with all the great conservation aims that the island's got as well, we need to make sure that it's a good fit. So if you want to find out more, visit our website. Just go to Lundy Island or Landmark Trust Lundy, and you'll see under Discovering Lundy our new page there. We've also introduced a new dedicated email address, which comes straight to me. That's the Renewable Energy Project at lundyisland.co.uk. And we hope that we'll be posting some visual representations on the website soon when we get some photographers over, just as soon as the weather improves a little bit, and you'll be able to see how it may look. The other thing to say is that on the website there are links to other similar schemes, particularly the one in on Fair Isle, where I went to have a look last year, and just to see how it looks, and you'll be able to see how it looks on a comparable island, and the Lundy model is kind of following their lead. So please give that a look and let us know what you think. Anyway, just to wrap up, thank you everybody for your continued support. I hope you get a chance to come to Lundy in the next year or so, and thanks to all of our friends and members of the Morisco Club. And if you're not a member yet, then come and join us, and visit the website and come and see us soon. You can see all the benefits there, but the biggest benefit of all, of course, is visiting a very special place that Lundy is. So we hope to see you soon. And if you get any questions, which I'm sure you will have, please feel free to fire them at us. We'll try and answer as many as we can tonight, but please use the email address if we do run out of time. But thank you very much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed that presentation.
Thank you very much, Derek. That was absolutely fascinating. And Joe, earlier on, I must admit I was very lucky to be able to go to Lundy for the first time last summer. Had an absolutely fantastic time, and probably the highlight was I took up Rob's challenge of collecting all the Lundy letterboxes in one weekend, which was quite a challenge, but I did get them all, plus the rabbits. So I was very, very pleased with myself. Super fun, but it's an amazing place, and do visit if you've got the chance. We've got a couple of questions in the chat. I think Laura's answered quite a few as we've been going along. Derek, we seem to have lost your camera. Not sure if that's deliberate or we can still hear you though.
Can you hear?
I can. Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
That's
Sorry,
okay.
Alison, I just got kicked out there for a minute.
No problem. This is probably a question for Joe. Question about the rhododendron seedlings. When you've picked them, what do you do to exterminate them?
Excellent. Yes, that's great. I'm trying to type a response, but I'm ending up with an essay, so it'll be easy just talking through it. And I'm zooming from the island, so I had a little brief power outage or something, which meant I left the Zoom. So I can't see all the historic questions. So sorry I haven't responded to that one yet. Basically, huge efforts over the last 25 years were put into cutting and burning the forest effectively. Now it's just the little seedlings popping up in the seed bank. Those are uprooted and then basically just left exposed to the really unforgiving saline conditions, salt air, and then they basically just perish then. But with our regular walks, we're picking up every seedling that's popping up and making sure that any don't re-establish. Basically, it's a lot of work. We are trying not to use any herbicides where possible. I mean, the island's a SSSI site of special scientific interest, so we don't want to do anything detrimental to the island's protections and its wildlife. So we've opted for the slightly gentler but labour-intensive uprooting and then just leaving those roots exposed. Cutting off any seed heads as well. I encourage anyone that visits to either just pull off the pink flowering head if they see one, although unlikely now, or if it's in a really dodgy spot on the edge of a cliff, just come let me know, and I'll either send my ranger off or we'll get the rope access team to get the really awkward plants.
Great. This is probably one for Derek. There are several formal dwellings that are not usable. Are there any plans to restore any more of the properties on Lundy?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Lundy's got many scheduled monuments, as some people may know. We've got 43, 44, depending on your point of view. But one of the questions I get asked quite regularly is about the Bellevue cottages, which are part of the old quarry complex. They would make a great landmark, it's no doubt. But we decided a few years ago that the island needs so much investment just to keep it going and to renew the infrastructure that our focus is firmly on maintaining, the existing buildings that we've got. So at the moment, we've got no real plans to do anything with any of those historic grounds. I think it's great that people come to Lundy and and they can enjoy those ruins as well, because there's a wealth of history there and lots of interpretation on the island for people to kind of live and breathe it. And it makes it's one of the things that makes Lundy really special.
Great. I think that's probably all we've got time for. We have run over a little bit. If you've got a question that we didn't have time to answer, do please just drop us a line to the email that we'll send you, and we'll do our best to get back to you individually. I'd like to thank Derek and Joe very much for the presentations this evening. That was absolutely fascinating. So thank you so much for your time. We hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for supporting Lundy. We will be sending around an email in the next couple of days with a link to this recording if you want to watch it back, and some further information, links to pages on the website and other information, particularly about the renewables project. So you can read a little bit more about that and look at the options that we have considered and why Lundy are choosing to go with the particular option that they've going ahead with the National Trust. So do have a look at all of that. And I think that's all from us. So thank you very much. Have a lovely rest of your evening, and we hope to see you soon on Lundy. Thank you.